that all people eat pizzas. So I guess we are going live.
Yeah, we're going live right now. Yeah. So did I understand correctly? Were you in the Bologna tournament? Were you there?
Could you please repeat now?
There was 9 teams from Italy, excuse me, 9 teams from India. I think 9 teams I heard in the Italy tournament with the Nader. And
No, ma'am, I wasn't there.
okay, got you. Now I'm understanding better. So we'll just do this together and make sure I put the slide deck in at the end. So make a note for me, the old lady who will probably forget. And there's 2 of us presenting. Am I the first one to present or the second one to present, Ranjali?
Ma'am, you are the second one. This is the second thing.
That's good to know. I looked at her slide deck. It was really wonderful. And I put a little extra into mine to kind of do a little match with hers. So we'll have everyone totally educated.
Yes.
Are the students required to be here, or Pranzi, or is it their
They'll be there on YouTube Live itself. They'll not join the meeting.
got you on YouTube Live? Are they required to watch the trainings, or was it just their discretion?
I guess they are required. Obviously, this has helped them, so they should also.
Okay. All right, I'm going to put in my headset. And then would you like to start your introduction at 11:30 promptly? Is that what your plan is?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let me go do a few things and I'll be back in about 8 minutes or so. All right.
Yes, sure, ma'am.
I'm going to make sure that I can share the screen one more time. Yeah, there it is. Okay, nice. Okay. Excuse me. See you in a little while. Some water. They're streaming this live on YouTube. Very cool, Mom. Excited? Huh? Excited? It doesn't really matter to me. I'm just like, oh, that's what they're doing. They're getting like, it impacts me because they're getting like more global and more like sophisticated, more professional, more out there. These were law students 4 years ago. Crazy, right? New law students, yeah. Yeah. And they talk about having an agreement doing. Oh yeah. But it's funny they credit it to me, so much of it to me, and it's just it's not true, but I think just the support, like the cool titles that came up with the slide that came up. Now, man, they're like, we have another person coming in training and they've got all these partners and they're like, yeah, they're shooting everything they want to shoot.
Yeah, you need support for that stuff. People, you don't just get there on your own.
So without any further delays, we should continue now. So good day, everyone. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you all to the virtual international mediation competition hosted by Mediate Guru. I am honored to serve you as your anchor for this event and excited to witness the exceptional display of mediation skills from participants all over the world. Mediation is a powerful tool in resolving disputes and finding mutual benefit solutions. It requires patience, creativity, and effective communication skills. These qualities are essential in our global society as we face increasingly complex challenges that require cooperative solutions. Through this competition, We aim to promote and encourage the use of mediation as a preferred method of this dispute resolution. The participants have undergone rigorous training and they will showcase their skills in mediating a range of disputes. I would like to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed trainer for this event, Ms. Kathleen Ruane Leedy is a known expert in mediation and has trained numerous professionals across the globe. She is mediator at Precy County Center for Dispute Resolution, Washington, first court jurors for US, former divorce mediation at Norfolk Probate and Family Court MA, former court and training coordinator for Family Service of Central Massachusetts, former summary process mediator at Quincy District Court MA, former small claims and divorce mediator at Plymouth Family and Probate Court MA, former small claims and summary process mediator at Cape Mediation MA, former executive assistant to CFO and VP at Ram Power Corporation, former health educator at Greencastle Outram School District, studied Masters of Education at Shippensburg State University, studied Health and Physical Education K-12 at Shepherd University. We are honored to have her as our trainer for this competition. Ma'am will undoubtedly provide invaluable guidance and insight for the participant that will help them own their mediation skills. To the participants, I wish you all the very best in the competition. Your dedication and hard work will put to the test, but remember that experience and knowledge gained will invaluable to your future mediation endeavors. I urge you to embrace this opportunity to learn and grow as mediators. Once again, a warm welcome to all of you, and I look forward to an exciting and enriching event. Thank you. I would like to request ma'am to take the stage and enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francie. What a great introduction. It's a long list because I'm old and I've been on the earth a long time. I'd like to thank Mediate Guru once again for having me back to be their trainer for this mediation tournament. It's a pleasure to be here. You've already had a great training, and I hope to add on to what you've already enjoyed in regard to being productive in the tournament and what is mediation all about and what is it like to participate in the tournament. The big question is, how do I behave? And my answer always is just be yourselves. Just relax, be yourself. Every mediator needs to find, as I say, their style, confidence, and courage, those three things. And your style is the first thing where you learn to be comfortable being you. So don't feel like you have to copy anybody. Just feel like you can be yourself and move forward in this tournament. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. And let's go ahead and go into this tournament deck. Let's see what we've got going on here. All right. I love the graphic that Mediate Guru has used for this tournament because it does show people gathered at the table. And at the end of the day, all the mediation process is about is really a conversation around the table. That means we can talk in our regular language. That means we can be ourselves. That means we don't have to be so uber professional all the time. We can just be ourselves and be comfortable being ourselves. Let me put this large enough for everyone to see. So let's go into it. And here it is again. It's your natural skills plus new skills that you'll learn from other people in the tournament, and new skills that you may find yourself saying something in the tournament that you've never said before in practices. So new skills are coming forward. It's the growth that we allow ourselves to happen, that we allow to happen in ourselves. It defines our mediator style, confidence, and courage. and practicing and repracticing the style, confidence, and courage at the mediation table then determines your level of mastery at the mediation table. And if you talk, to the best mediators around the world, they have high mastery and they have high agreement rates as well. The best mediators that I know, the agreement rate is in the 90 percentiles. So let's go see what we're going to do here. Mediators hold the balance for the diversity of topics. And we have to be the one that's confident at the table because we're the conductor of this process. I always say the mediator is the most important person at the table. And because we are holding so many balls in the air at one time, we have to approach our job with the SMART method. When you learn about mediation, you learn from these slide decks where me and my co-presenter have shared with you. You have to organize the information that you've learned from us into these SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based goals. What's your strategy? Write it out as client advocate. What are you looking for? How can you measure it? What's the progress that you're going to use to measure at your mediation table? What's really attainable? What's the timing of attainability? You're not trying to get to the end of your tournament at the very beginning. So you want to go ahead and have attainable, accomplishable goals along the way, even in your advocate client strategy. Okay, what are we trying to accomplish in the beginning? What are we trying to accomplish in the middle? So you take all of the mediation process of what's happening, including the mediators, which I'll speak to in more specific details soon. You take all of these goals that you're trying to accomplish and you go to your CIs when you get them and you work backwards to make sure your CIs are what you are weaved through your general facts as well, and that you're able to attain the goals your CI says to either do or not to do. So you combine them. With your goals for your CI, you're not really supposed to give your CI information at the beginning of the tournament. You deal with your general facts. But what you're supposed to accomplish in the tournament is what your CI says. So you have to blend them both, and everything's got to be attainable and relevant for the timing. What's relevant for the timing is in the beginning of the mediation, you introduce yourselves and who you are and what your role is. That's relevant for the timing. You don't talk about what you want right away because that's not relevant. You're just in the introduction phase of the mediation. So we need our IQ, our EQ, which is our emotional intelligence, and our SQ, which is our social intelligence about how are we relating to people around the table. And I'm going to go ahead and put my slide deck into the chat by the end, so you will have this for yourselves to look over if you'd like to, all the way through the tournament. In regard to mediation and the mediators, we conduct a process, and we have to understand, even though this process has stages and steps, we are taking people on an unknown journey. After we give our mediators opening statements that you've been practicing, we have no idea what people are going to be saying after that. So we have to be comfortable and being comfortable with the unknown, comfortable with maybe even the uncomfortable. We hold the space, we hold the process steady because we're the conductor of the symphony. The people at the table are like instruments in the symphony. We are like the conductor. We are conducting the process. Because of this symmetry of conducting a process, that means the process needs to move. You can't go listen to a symphony and the instruments don't do anything. They have to move in timing with each other. And mediation is the same way. It requires movement. And it's not about sitting at the table and saying, this is what I want. Mediation is never about demanding or taking. Mediation is about, this is what we'd like to offer to you, client advocate, to you, to remedy this situation. What do you think about that? So when we're offering receiving as judges, we like to see counsel and client on one side offer up opportunities to the other side. This is what we would like to think that's good for us. Is it also good for you? And the statement, is it also good for you, is called a transition statement or transition question. And we want to see you reach across the table and talk to the other side. Show concern, because it's the mediation process, which typically is what I say is a fully empowered conversation. If we're going to have a fully empowered conversation, that means we fully empower ourselves, but we also offer the opportunity to fully empower the other people across the table. And mediators, if you have one side talking all the time, you need to fully empower the other side as well. And it's called apportionment time. How long does someone have the airwaves? How long is someone talking at your table? So mediators, we maintain the space. We're totally present. We're using our body language. We're looking at their eyes. We're listening to their tone. We're demonstrating unconditional positive regard for everyone, even if somebody is not being so attractive right now with the use of language or maybe their emotionality at the table. We don't care about that. What we care about is extending care from us as the mediator to everyone at the table. And it's a form of loving kindness because we demonstrate this unconditional positive regard. So as a mediator, we don't try to fix things. We just summarize what we heard people say, and we check in to maintain our accuracy. So as a mediator, as we move on to these stages, I'm going to tell you how I look at the conversation at the table. People are making decisions in 3 areas, and this is from Aristotle. We have our old greats in many cultures that have taught us how to be more forthcoming and have taught us how to evolve as greater human beings. And at the mediation table, you've either got the logos, people are using their sense of reason. Well, this logically makes sense. So I want 50,000 USD because it logically makes sense. But then we've got the ethos. Well, this is the value and this is the credibility that I bring to the table. So that needs to have more money because of my past practices, because of the credibility and the value that's here present at the mediation table. And then we've got the pathos, which I'm emotional, and this means a lot to me, and this matters. This was my grandfather's company. And, I think this is why it should be more important, because this is in my family for 4 generations, and you'll see people using the power of persuasion. So we've got rationality at the table, we've got credibility at the table, and we've got persuasion at the table. And we call this the 3 appeals. That's why for mediators, it's very important to say, so thank you for what you've just said. Here's my transition sentence. Transition statements and questions keep the mediation together. It's like the glue of the whole mediation process. Thank you for what I just heard you said. That's gratitude. I say it all the time. What I just heard you said is my transition sentence. Let me make sure that I know what I heard you say. And this is what I think I heard you say. And I have a screen later on that gives you 20 different ways to put that out there. As your mediator, I'm going to repeat back to you what I think I heard you say. So we summarize, and I highly urge you to summarize after client and counsel's opening statements. Don't summarize all 4 of them. Summarize at least one side at a time. I recommend that before client goes, if counsel goes first, that you actually summarize counsel. Excuse me 1 second. Let me make sure, counsel, I heard what you said. I recommend you have 4 summaries with the opening joint process statements of the clients. But if you want to, you can summarize 1 team. There's nothing wrong with that. But also, if you're going to summarize 2 people, ask them, please let me know if I missed something, because now you're summarizing 2 people instead of summarizing 1. So the brain capacity to remember what 2 people have said is less than the brain capacity to remember what 1 person has said typically. As young lawyers in law school, you're using your tremendous brain power not to memorize case law, not to prepare yourself for trial. You're using your humongous brain abilities to focus and memorize parties' key words at your table. In counsel and client, you can do the same thing at the table. You can say, so thank you for what I just heard you say, and this is what I think I heard you say. So we have to understand that people are coming at us from these 3 different directions. When we look at the SMART goals of each step of the mediation process, we have the mediator conducting this process, all 7 of these steps. But we have client and advocate journeying together. And we have a judgment for client advocate as judges, we're judging you. And we have the use of the mediator oftentimes in tournaments that we're judging as well. So what you have to make sure that you do as client advocate as you journey through this mediation process that's being conducted by the mediator, you have to talk to each other. If you have not talked to your mediator 5 or 6 times, for sure, we don't have the ability to judge you very well on your use of the mediator. If you don't talk to each other, excuse me, what do you think about that? As my client, what do you think about that? Excuse me, as my lawyer, what do you think about that? What do you think about this? Transition statements. If you haven't done that to each other 5 or 6 times, we cannot judge you clearly on your client advocate team. So please have this in your head. 5 to 6 times is the least that you need to be talking to the mediator at the table or co-mediators at the table, and you need to be talking to each other. And are you reaching across the table 5 or 6 times to journey together with the other team across from you? No matter what this is about and how good this process is, this is a team. So therefore, client advocate, yes, counsels, you are there for the advisory capacity and to protect the interest of your client. Yes, you are. But because you're at the mediation table, you're also there to extend over and build a bridge to the other side to see if their interests are being protected as well. Maybe not as much as your own client, but at least they've got, as we say in the States, they've got some skin in the game. You are making sure that they have a win-win as well as you and your client. I cannot stress that enough. So I'm going to go through these 7 steps soon. And step 7, SMART Goal 7, craft an agreement, we usually do not get to in the tournament, just to make that clear. But look how I break this down. As a mediator, you've got 4 parts. You've got the introductions of yourself, where you get to display your personal warmth. You've got the business at hand. Before we get started, does everyone have the authority to make decisions without contacting someone else? The third part of this process is your mediator's opening statement with the principles of mediation: voluntary, confidential, neutral. Mediation is about self-determination. Those 4 exist across the globe. And the 4th part is 3B. The principles are 3A. 3B is, this is the process that's going to happen today at the mediation table. As mediators, you are not there by yourself. I say, as your mediator, I say this at my table, and I say the mediation process encourages this. And I also say the mediation table. I'm always have a partner of the table, the process with me as I'm mediating. I am not there alone. And of course, in the co-mediation tournament, you have the other mediator that you can turn to and say, do you have any comments to make about this as well? The co-mediation tournament, you should be using each other as well, talking back and forth to show the cooperation. So we're going to head forward into these SMART goals. You by now should have scripted out your mediator's opening statement, 3 parts, 3A, 3B. And you're going to explain clearly each stage. That is, they are not all together. It's not like a plate of food. The mediator's opening statement is in the 4 parts, 1, 2, 3A, and 3B, as I teach it. And you don't want to mix them up. So what are you starting with? You're starting with the welcome and the introductions. Thank you very much. We've all introduced ourselves at the table, and I've heard how you would like to be addressed. Now let me move on to the business at hand. So all the business, ground rules, business, do you have the power to make decisions without contacting someone else? Anything you want to say about mediation, you can put into the business category, number 2 of your SMART goal. The principles of mediation need to be described at the table. You can't forget it. The VCNSD, voluntary, confidential, neutral, self-determination, and also the process here today at the table. And lastly, does anyone have any questions? I recommend that people do this in these 4 different boxes and don't mix them around. So you know what you've been training for. Maybe you want to add something. Maybe you want to reorganize your mediator's opening statement a little bit. This, to be done best, is memorized. A guide for you as a mediator and also as a judge, you should be able to make your mediator's opening statement in around 5 minutes. So you're not taking all the time away for the competition. It's very important. Client counsel, same thing. Your introductory statements between the 2 of you should be about 5 minutes. So we've got 5 minutes for the mediators, 5 minutes for one side of the table, client counsel, and 5 minutes for the other side. We've used up 15 minutes just to open up the mediation. That's why you don't want to take longer than that. So try to memorize, mediators, try to memorize what you need to say, and then give yourself a script. next to you, give yourself a script where you have, excuse me 1 second, I'm so sorry, where you are talking about your mediator's opening statement. Write it down on paper, take your finger, put it next to the paper, move your finger when you've talked about something to help you with your confidence in this process. I cannot talk enough about memorizing, because with the memorizing, you're also going to be summarizing. And after parties talk and you summarize, you need to memorize and write down the key words that you've heard. So memorizing is one of the greatest mediators' skill sets. You have to summarize because it's the only way, besides nodding our head and smiling, summarizing and talking back to the parties about what we heard is the only way that they know that we heard them. We have to prove that we heard them. The way that we prove that we heard them is by summarizing. And if you don't memorize their key words and you use your own words instead, it's not going to be 100% accurate. So you want to think about using parties' key words. And after you are done summarizing, the mastery question, when I say mastery, it means it works all the time for me. Is there anything else you would like to say? Do you have anything else to mention? Is there anything else? I say that all the time after I'm done summarizing to clients and they say, yes, that you heard me correctly, Kathleen. It's always about the anything else, because people talking, it's their narrative, and it's very important that people are able to speak their narrative and that you don't interrupt them, and then you summarize it accurately at the end. So this process of summarizing, what people say as mediators, you do it all the way through the entire mediation, and you never let anyone talk for a long time. You never let anyone talk for a long time because you cannot summarize all that. So what's a mediator skill? It's actually, we have a mediator skill of interrupting. It's very important that you have the ability to interrupt. Your brain can only remember so much stuff. So you have to interrupt and say, excuse me 1 moment, I need to interrupt. I want to make sure I've heard what you said thus far. That's a transition statement. 2 of them, excuse me 1 moment, I need to interrupt. Transition statement. You're getting into the conversation so I can clearly explain what I've heard you say so far so I don't lose the accuracy. 3 transition statements to interrupt to get you in there so you can summarize. You have to feel comfortable interrupting. When you look at the box in the middle here of setting the agenda, this can take a long time typically in a tournament. You don't want it to take a long time. You want to talk about setting the agenda in a couple different ways. You can either say, as your mediator, we've heard certain key points and use money, time, possessions, exchange of documents, whatever it is, we've heard these key points. It seems like this is the beginning of an agenda. Is that correct? You can start the agenda on your own if you want to, or you can let the parties. Sometimes they'll give you the agenda and the opening statement. You can say, thank you very much. We will talk about that in the agenda phase. But you're going to remember what they told you, or you can ask counsel and client, okay, let's go ahead and talk about that agenda transition statement that you mentioned in your opening joint statement, and you can get your agenda out there. Remember, each side is allowed to have their own agenda points, and sometimes you can merge them. And you're not talking about the order of the agenda. You're just writing the agenda down, no more than 3 words for each topic. If somebody wants 50,000 USD and somebody else wants 100,000 USD, you don't put 50, you don't put 100,000, you put money. We need to talk about monies. Is that correct? You find out that your agenda has permissions from both sides. And you not only write the agenda down, you have them write it down. And please write the agenda down yourselves as I'm saying it aloud. And you have your co-mediator put it in the chat. If you have a co-mediation model, 1 mediator talks to parties, 1 mediator puts the items in the chat. And of course, in a co-mediation tournament, you're taking turns with responsibilities talking to people because we need to judge you both. So if you're a solo mediation tournament, you do it all, of course. When you want to select the order of talking points, the agenda can be flexible and you can say that, but would anyone like, is there anything important that you both would like to talk about first? Well, I want to talk about this first. I want to talk about this first. You both want to talk about this first? Yes. So now we need to figure out who is willing to go second. So I always ask for the top 3 items at my mediation table. I get the top 3. If they don't know what they are, I ask them, what's the last thing? What's the most least important thing that you want to talk about? So you can use the order of speaking any way you can to get an order, or you can say, you know, this can be flexible. We can bounce around, but as the mediator, be ready to bounce around. The agenda is the steering wheel to the whole mediation process. It needs to be done well before you move on and start talking to people. With the continued sessions, when we have the use of a private session, when that happens, what is the point of a private session? Excuse me. The point of a private session, you've got 2 responsibilities in your private sessions. Your SMART goals are 2 things for your private sessions. Number 1, what do you not want me to talk about? All the tournaments I'm in, even the one that I just did in Bologna, Italy last weekend, only one person said this. And it's a problem, because if you say everything is confidential here in the confidential caucus, extra layer of confidentiality in the caucus, we have a problem. Now you don't have permission to talk about it when you go talk to the other side in their caucus. You don't have permission to talk about it when you come to the joint continued sessions. The responsibility of you in the caucus session is to make sure that you write down, that they tell you, and that everyone is agreeing on what you cannot talk about. Please understand this distinction, because it gives you the freedom as the mediator to use all the rest of the information that's been discussed in your private session. The second SMART goal for your responsibilities for the caucus and private session is to transmit information. Sometimes in the tournaments, will you please tell them this? Your first responsibility with transmission of information is, so can you please share with me why you'd like me to transmit it rather than yourselves transmit it? Or how about you consider, let's talk about you sharing this information, because your job as a mediator is to empower the parties. If they insist that you transmit information from their private caucus to the mediation table, or from their private caucus to the other side's private caucus, you write it down and you say it aloud and you say, is this what you want me to say? You do not verbally transmit information without it having a written script in front of you. That's why as you write what they want you to transmit, you are saying it aloud. You say, transition sentence, okay, I'm going to write down what you want me to say to the other side when we return back to the joint session, or when I go over to their private caucus. And you write it down. And when you get to the other side, you say, I have permission, written permission. I have permission to share this information with you. You are protecting your role as mediator. Even in a tournament, I had a counsel, a lawyer, burst out in the middle of a tournament 3 months ago and say, I didn't say that to you, Madam Mediator, right in the middle of the tournament. Can you imagine? Everyone went quiet. The mediator did not know what to say. So this is very important, that your SMART goals for the private session, that you attain them and you remember them and make yourself a note of them as well. The use of the private session is for extra privacy. It's to go deeper. In this mediation tournament, you may stay together in joint session for a while. And you're summarizing. Someone talks, you summarize. Someone talks, you summarize. You can ask parties, you can ask them to summarize each other as mediators. So counsels, why don't you just share with me what you both heard each other say? I call it a cross summary. You can do cross summarizations if you want to, which would be really great as a judge to see. I'm sure the judges would really enjoy seeing that new skill. And if you have to go to private session as a mediator, or if parties call it private session, it's to go deeper. You need to go deeper in prod in your private caucus. Sometimes in models, when I teach mediation, as I'm teaching right now, the last 3 or 4 days, I'm teaching a class. I tell mediators to disrupt the logic of parties. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your case when you've got them in private session? When you're in private session with parties and advocate client, when you're in private session as well, accomplish something, get something done. Okay, so we're going to come out of this private session with either a new clarity. We're going to come out of this private session with sharing highly confidential information and asking the mediator what is the best way to share it. We're going to come out of the private session because we needed to vent. We needed to blow off some steam, as we say in the States. Utilize the private session for a purpose. And the mediator, it is your job to summarize what has happened in this private session. Yes, but furthermore, how we're going to use it as we move forward. So this information that we've gained in the private session, this is my transition sentence, this information that we've learned in the private session, we will be utilizing this information when we return to the joint in this manner, in this fashion. I, as your mediator, will go ahead and talk about this, or I will introduce you to talk about this new information that we've learned in this private session. Or if it was just a venting frustration, so it seems like you've been able to vent in this private session. These are mediator statements. And now you have more of a calm moving forward into the joint session. Would that be correct? And they're going to tell you yes. You're accomplishing something, but you're also transitioning what you accomplished in the private caucus into the joint, further joints, or the next private caucus. In the private caucus, we say thank you to the other side for waiting before we go to the private caucus. We also say, please consider some creative options. We give the other team a homework assignment as mediators. So think about, when you look at your general facts, when you look at your role play, when you listen to the conversation, what do you want the team that's not in the caucus with you to be doing to further the advances of the mediation? I rarely see this as a mediator. And this, when this happens as a judge, I'm giving people extra points for it, because it's actually the way that a mediation is supposed to go. You want to say also, you want to use gratitude. When I come back from the private caucus to the joint session, I'm going to say thank you for the private session that we just had. In the private session, this was the information that was discovered. This was the information that was discussed. I'm going to be asking so-and-so to share this particular information. You have to have your transition statements as mediators when you come out of the private caucus. Crafting an agreement starts in the beginning of the mediation, and I'm going to talk about this because of the fact that crafting an agreement is a big deal all along the way. The reason that it's a big deal along the way is that you want to create meaning. See, the meaning people have when they come to your mediation table in the tournament is that we're fighting. We don't agree. We want something that we can't get. Or we want to stop doing something that the other party still wants. That's what people are coming to the table with. That's their meaning. Okay, conflict, 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 conflict. When we start to hear as mediators something that sounds like an agreement, we interrupt. We say, excuse me, does that sound like that might be a partial agreement for agenda point number 1, at least a partial agreement? And we write it down. I hold up a piece of paper. I literally say, this is my living rough draft. I'm going to be writing down partial agreements as I hear them. And I will be interrupting the mediation to try to memorialize, to capture the meaning of anything that I hear as a potential partial or full agreement. That's literally what I say in my mediation. And then I do it. So I've got this living rough draft. You don't end up with drafting an agreement probably in your round, but you're going to have to go ahead and memorialize and say it out loud as a mediator, what you hear. So as the mediators, you're not in a rush. You're simply reiterate summarizing, which means you're using parties' words to summarize, to make sure that you heard what they said, to make sure they meant to say that, to allow them to correct you as a mediator. Oh, no, I didn't say that. I said this. And all you do as a mediator is say thank you. But now what you're doing is you're writing down. It's pre-agreement, half informal sentences. Because the final agreement that you won't get to in the tournament is actually to wordsmith. When you write down an agreement and everyone roughly agrees to it, the key to agreement writing is saying the last copy, the last form of this agreement, we will be wordsmithing. Wordsmithing means you're changing a text, you're changing a word to improve the clarity and style. I say to people at the end when I'm making drafting the agreement, I'm going to read this aloud, and you are reading aloud as mediators. What you hear are half agreements, full agreements. You're reading it aloud to them. And I say at the end of this process, if you disagree with a word, please stop me. So every word that is written down on a mediated agreement has both parties' approvals to it. What does this mean to you in the tournament? This means that when you hear an agreement, you want to make sure you're capturing a lot of specificity. Excuse me, I didn't even say that word right. The specificness of the agreement. You want to make sure that you're clearly using the words parties are saying to you. So with that in mind, this is a time where if you have questions about anything I said, you're going to start to enter them into your chats, and we're going to be able to talk about those questions in a few. But I want to move on to talk about how do you talk to people during the tournament at your table, which is a training that Mediate Guru and I do, which is actually coming up in April. It's an advanced mastery level training. So let's talk about talking at the mediation table. There is a gene that we all carry for understanding of speech and language. That means that everyone has the ability to understand, and this is what the gene looks like. I find science very intriguing. I started out in colleges in microbiology, and I'm all about the science, but it actually provides validation for what we do as mediators. And I teach science when I train people to become mediators. So because of this gene, mediators and client advocates as well, you want to have transparent conversations, transparent communication, of being fully present as mediators at the table. So these are all the ways, all the words, entry words that you can say before you summarize somebody. And if you are sitting in this tournament and your mediator is not summarizing as much as what they should be, counsel, you can summarize. Client, you can summarize. As I hear it from you, as opposing counsel at the table, this is what I'm hearing you say. Right now, you are saying at this mediation table right now, this is what we are hearing. Your words are saying, you have just said, let me see if I have this correctly. Or as mediators, we can use a one-line summary. We can literally say, for you, this is about making money. For you, this is about trust. You can literally summarize with one general summary statement to each side of the table. For you, this is about money, and for you, this is about trust. You can literally do that. As mediators and client counsel as well, the transparent communication, the nonviolent transparent communication can be, I understand how that would happen. I just did a tournament in Italy, and one of the role plays was about a delivery service delivering a box to a person in their home. And it had two numbers were wrong on the address. The strategy this team took was to vilify the person for opening the box. And when I was judging at the end, I said, look, to reach across the table and build a bridge to someone else, yeah, you want the contents of the box back, correct? But you need to say, I can understand how you would receive a box in your home and open it up to see what's inside. So in your general facts, you have to look for the places that you can understand how the opposing side would do something. Or maybe you start out your role play with an apology. It seems like that we owe you an apology. This is all transparent, nonviolent communication that builds bridges. Mediators, you also want to get to the more factor at the table, especially if you don't understand it, or especially if you think the other side doesn't understand it. So the transparent communication becomes Can you tell me more about what you just said to me? How did that happen to you? Can you explain more of how this was for you when it happened? What is the meaning for you? I heard you tell me about the story, but what does this mean to your business? Are you both comfortable talking to each other in this way if emotions get elevated at the table? Are you both comfortable? I just want to make sure everyone is still comfortable having this lengthy conversation on still agenda point number 4, or do we want to move on? This is what mediators do with our open, transparent communication, our nonviolent communication, transparent conversation. But client advocate, you can also do it too to boost your role in the tournament, especially if you have a mediator. It might be really scared. It might be their first tournament and they might be afraid to talk, or they don't know how to jump in. I did the semifinals last weekend, and one of the mediators didn't know how to interrupt. So therefore, client counsel, if you have a mediator that doesn't know how to handle the mediation table in the moment, you can do it as well. Mediators, we say things like, especially in the private session, what do you think is the best case, worst case scenario for you? This is transparent conversation, communication. What are your weaknesses? What are your strengths? Client counsel at the table, you can do the same thing. Well, we hear what you're saying to us right now, but what do you think are the weaknesses of your case right now? What are the weaknesses of what you've brought to this mediation table? I've never heard anyone say that. That would be wonderful as a judge to hear that. Client counsel at the table, mediator at the table, you can say, why don't we all just step back for a moment? Seems like we've been talking about things 3 times in a row. What I'm saying here is this. Mediators, you should be saying these things. Client counsel, you can say these things as well to further the momentum on the table to keep the mediation moving, because communication is entangled. Therefore, as the mediator, we have to pull out the linear. What's the concrete thing that was said that makes sense, moving them toward agreement? What did you really hear them say amongst their story? What's the linear that really matters to them? What's the general impression of what you're hearing? A general impression statement from a mediator might be something like, it seems like this has been a very difficult situation for both of you here at this mediation table. And you just wait to see. So we can talk about the linear, what we hear as mediators, because they've said it, so we can summarize it, or we can talk about the general impression that we are getting as we listen to people talk at our mediation table. We are supporting communication as mediators at our mediation table. There are 4 pillars of how we do that. One of the ways that a mediator supports communication is by sounds. Yes. Sounds in 1 word. Okay. I see. 2 words. This is support. This is helping someone have confidence, because you are acknowledging just with body language and your sound. When I train, I make people do only sounds for a while. It's really kind of funny, actually. They can't use their body language. They can't use any words. We just practice with the sounds. So as the mediator, you can maybe do a little practice with the sounds that you'd like to make when you are affirming that you're hearing someone at your mediation table. Your body language, you should be utilizing a head nod for sure, at least a head nod. But you also can lean in. You also can smile. You see my hands are a bit expressive. You can also do that, but try not to do it too much, because if I go like this is what's happening on Zoom. So you want to keep your hands down low on the table in front of you. Underneath the table, your body can do whatever it wants to. I had someone last weekend say, Kathleen, thank you for telling me about that underneath the table, because I was so nervous, but up from here up, Kathleen, I look composed, but underneath the table, I was shaking my foot, tapping my leg, doing all this kind of stuff. So they're able to get some of their nervousness out below the table. With our words, we can use 1 word. We can use 2 words. Oh yeah, I see that. I understand. We can use phrases. The word if, you should be saying the word if, and I learned this from my friend that was a fellow judge a couple weeks ago. She told everyone at the end of the tournament, if you haven't said the word if, you haven't done your job as a mediator or counsel. What if this would happen? What if we could do this way? What if we could imagine going back to the past and changing something that we did? So don't forget about the if word with the 4 pillars of transparent communication. The phrases I understand, I get it, of course, are very important for mediators to do, especially in the private session. Thank you for the understanding here at the mediation table. Try not to say I only if you're in private session, but when you show phrases of understanding, that's perfectly understandable how that could happen. The mediation table needed that understanding just now between the two of you. Thank you very much. I hear what you both have said. That's the I, because you are acknowledging you're allocating responsibility to yourself. I hear you. So these are some of the communication tricks that we use because we are validating and we're naming things out loud. It seems like having your company be successful is important to you. We're guessing, so we're going to identify our guessing out loud. It's called an attachment. When you think you're attaching importance of a company to a person at your mediation table, that's an attachment. So we say seems like, looks like, it feels like this mediation might need a private caucus right now. So as your mediator, I'm going to call a private caucus. And then we praise. We don't say, oh, this is, we don't say patronizing phrases like, I just say thank you for that. I don't say so much on agreements, that's amazing, but I would do the praising in private session with those words. But usually at the mediation table, I say thank you very much for coming to that agreement. That allows mediation to move. Let's go on to agenda item number 2. And the last thing we do to support transparent communication is we investigate. We literally say at the mediation table, with both parties there, I think I need you to tell me more about what you just said out loud. We say to counsel, did you understand what counsel across the table just said to you? Can you tell me what you have heard? As mediators, we do this cross-summarizing because we want to know if parties understood each other. So it's a very powerful tool. You can say, can you tell me more about what you just said, counsel? Can you tell me more about how it was that your house burned down? As the client here at the mediation table, I want to know more how this impacted you. Can you tell me more? When you said this, is there anything else? What did you mean when you used the word provocative? What exactly does that mean? Yesterday, I was training these subjective words that are on the table. Like yesterday in my training, someone said transparent, and I stopped it with a freeze frame judge, as I always do. And I said, so transparency is a subjective word. Can you please ask that person, what does transparency look like for you? We need to do that investigatory thing as mediators to make the clarity of what these words that are subjective mean on the table. 5 and 6, we kind of go easy does it, so don't be in a rush as a mediator. And if you think that the parties need your help, you go easier. Would you be willing to talk more about how this does not work for you? Would you be comfortable when we return from our caucus into the joint session to discuss this? Would it be okay for me to ask a question? When I heard you say this, may I ask you another question about what I heard you say? This is when we are tiptoeing into more of the unknown, but we're trying to get more details out on the table for this mediation to move forward. In this competition as mediators, you are actually competing yourself, yes, but you're actually helping the client advocate team compete even better to have more marks, higher marks. Now we have conclusion, and this usually happens before we come to an agreement. So this is what I'm hearing so far. It sounds like we are getting close to this becoming an agreement. Is that true? To conclude these thoughts, to wrap up these points, let's see if I'm hearing this right. It seems like you're deciding this right now about agenda item number 1. Am I to understand that this is too difficult for you and you really don't want to have this as your first agenda item? You'd like to leave this to the end of the list of the agenda, on the agenda? These kinds of things, conclusionary words, vocabulary. As mediators, we need vocabulary. You need to write these words down. and utilize them in the tournament so you can have growth as a mediator. You can have growth as client. You can have growth as counsel. So try this out and see how this happens for you. If you can do something different and add some of this training from the 2 trainers that you've had today, add it to what you're doing with your role plays. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get this slide deck link right now and put it into the chat so everyone can have it. And you are free to utilize this. I want people to, I give it out all the time because I want students to grow and learn in the mediation process, and sharing expertise and mastery that a lot of us have as trainers. You can come on back on camera, Pranzi, is important. So this is how we do it. So let me put this into the chat. You now all have the link to my slide deck that I just whipped through to make my time span of an hour work for us today. And especially go back to the stages as the mediator. Make sure you're organized with your mediator's opening statement. Make sure you say to parties a transition statement. So thank you very much for our introductions. Now we're going to move on to the business at hand. Does everyone want to have the power and authority to make decisions without contacting someone else? Thank you very much for that. Now I'm going to move into my mediator's opening statements. Use these transition sentences to the glue to the mediation. When you describe the process, say at the table, we're here together now in joint session. And I'm giving my mediator's opening statement right now. And pretty soon you're going to be giving your opening statements as clients and counsel at this mediation table together in joint session. Then we're going to be moving on to creating an agenda together in this joint session. And mediation is also about private caucuses, which have an extra layer of confidentiality. And explain that extra layer of what you don't want me to share, I won't. Explain how caucuses can also be utilized to transmit information via the mediator, or transmit and discover that you're going to go deeper in the private caucuses to find out more about what's happening here at the table. So you have my deck to utilize. Pranzi, let's what do we have for questions, if any?
Thank you for such an insightful session, ma'am. And now we'll
Welcome.
move to question and answer
Yeah.
session. Okay, so I guess we do have a question.
One of the mediator tools is silence. When you ask a question on the mediation table, just go silent as the mediator and give people time to think about their answers and talk back to you. Don't feel like you have to ask 2 and 3 questions in a row. 1 question at a time, and just wait like we're waiting right now.
Yes, ma'am. So here is the question.
Mhm.
So how to jump in the conversation between the counsel and clients in the online mode, because it gets a little difficult when they are arguing.
Yes. So this is how you jump in. You literally have to jump. So let me talk about a skill set, a mediator tool. Skill in the toolbox. When people talk, at the end of each word, there's a space. All right. At the end of each sentence, there's a space. There's a pause, a space. You jump in the space. And not only that, when you jump and you talk like this really fast, you say, excuse me 1 moment, I need to interrupt because I have a question. Oh, excuse me 1 moment, I need to interrupt because I want to actually summarize what I heard you say. My switching pauses between my words are very small. My words are very quick. That's the skill set that a mediator uses to interrupt. And you repeat yourself if they don't stop talking. Excuse me 1 moment, I'm interrupting here. But you say it fast. Excuse me 1 moment, I need to interrupt. See how I changed the tenor of my voice, the tone of my voice? Mediator voice tonality is incredibly important at the mediation table. And when I'm serious, I go, excuse me, I need to interrupt. My voice changes. I become more professional. I become more serious with my voice change. So that is how you do interrupt. And you do not allow them to keep on talking. You literally interrupt. And then when they finally give you the floor as a mediator, you say, thank you very much. You've set up, you use a transition sentence. I'm interrupting because my transition sentence. So I need to summarize everything that you've said. So this is what I think I've heard you say. Then you go back to why you're interrupting. You do it. So you're talking much faster. Sometimes in person, I'll put my hand on the table. You cannot raise your hand like this on Zoom. You can't use that kind of too strong body language. You just need to raise the tone of your voice like this and raise your volume if people are not hearing you. That's how you accomplish this as the mediator. And you are waiting for a place where you can do that graciously and with dignity on behalf of your clients and on behalf of yourself as well. I interrupt in parties' opening statements if they go on too long, which doesn't usually happen in the tournaments, but in real life, sometimes people can talk a lot. And I have to interrupt because my brain is full. I'm not going to do a good job as a mediator if I don't stop them, clarify them, summarize them, and then say, please continue. And then when they get done with the rest of their continue, then I'll clarify that again. I'll clarify that, excuse me. And I may say, is there anything else at the end of it? So that's a technique that I use myself and how I train for interrupting. Some judges may say that you interrupted and it was rude. You're going to have to take that chance. The cost of not interrupting is you now cannot summarize very well. You now, as the mediator, cannot bring the clarity and the accuracy of information that's needed at the table. And in the tournament, the client counsel teams may have trouble coming to any kind of decisions because you as the mediator are not clarifying enough. So if you need to be clarifying, as in you need, I keep saying, mediators need to be clarifying 5 and 6 times at least in the tournament. This 5 and 6 time rule is a very important rule because it gets you noticed by the judges. And if you have a judge that feels like it was a bit rude how the interruption was handled, then you're just going to have to listen to that and try to see the judge's point, because we're all judging subjectively from our styles and our experiences, and we all have different vocations. Not every mediation judge is a mediator. They come from all walks of life. So we have to be ready as students to show mediator humility, client advocate humility as we listen to the judge's comments about our performance. We just need to take it in and filter it out for ourselves.
So we have some more questions.
Mm-hmm.
So while reaching the end of the session, if a settlement is achieved, and what is the appropriate way for the mediator to end the session?
If a settlement is achieved, that means that you've actually have agreement. So you summarize, thank you for the agreements that we've had. You summarize everything. We started out with 6 agenda points. We have found agreement to each agenda point. Let me read each agreement aloud from my mediator's rough draft sheet. The mediator's going to read it aloud at the end of the tournament. And then you're going to thank people for their efforts. Thank you very much for this effort today at the mediation table. Thank you. This mediation process seemed to be productive for everyone. And thank you for reaching settlement with each other. That's the way that you end it. If you have time in the tournament, which one team last weekend had time, you start to draft out the agreements. And you say how I train. I'm going to start to write out the agreements. Stop me if you don't like a word that I say. So that's where a team can take it out, actually drafting the mediated agreement on paper, because every mediation, if it comes to a settlement, ends up with a written agreement. So they can actually take it to that step if they have time. But don't rush. As judges, we don't want to see you rush to agreement. We want to, what we see in front of us, we want it to be quality, a quality experience. Even if it doesn't get past something, we still are looking for the quality of it. And that's how we're judging.
The next is, kindly also elaborate on the appropriate manner to conclude in case all the issues have not been resolved.
Well, if all the issues haven't been resolved, we don't focus on that. the first thing we say is saying thank you. Let's say no issues have been resolved, 0. Thank you for this rich discussion today at the mediation table. It seems like we need to schedule a second mediation to continue forward. As your mediator, we've had a lot of clarifying of points. I have a much better understanding of what's important to each of you. And would you be willing to have a second mediation? So that's what you do if there's no agreements at the end, 0. If you've got 3 out of 5 or 6 or 2, whatever the number is, you say, we've reached, thank you very much for this rich discussion today at the mediation table. We have reached one agreement thus far, and this is the agreement that's been reached. And I'm looking forward to future discussions about the other points that are still on the agenda. You don't talk about how we didn't reach an agreement. I mediate at the higher metaphysics of life. I don't talk about the negative so much in the mediation because the negative sinks 5 times into the brain, more so than the positive. So I keep talking about the positive. So I'm going to say, thank you for the 2 that we have agreed to, or the 1 that we've agreed to. And we have the rest of our agenda yet to discuss, or to discuss even more to reach agreement. Notice how I didn't say we didn't reach an agreement. So mediation has a meta to it. It's got to feel good at the table. As the mediator, you have to capture the words, but you also have to capture the emotionality. It looks like when you said that to me that you lowered your eyes. Is there something that's bothering you? Because I heard you say that you agreed to this, but you looked down at the table. So it's the meta of the mediation we're grabbing as mediators as well. So when mediation is over, we want people to feel good about what happened here today at the table. Because literally, although I think the settlement rate is important as a mediator, I think that the clarity of what's happened at the table is important as well. So it's all good in my mind. Pranzi, one time I was summarizing for parties at the table in a landlord-tenant case in Massachusetts. And I said, one of the things that you both agree with is that you don't like each other very much. I literally said it out loud. The mediator next to me that has never summarized emotionality almost fell out of the chair next to me. And you know what my clients did, Pranzi? They looked at each other and laughed. They said, you're right. Well, I already knew I was right because in the private sessions, they both told me. But I had the courage to summarize it. And see that clarity and that easy meta feel. Now they're laughing about the fact that they don't like each other very much. They came in being mad about the fact they don't like each other very much. And because of the clarity of the mediator, now they're laughing about it. We always protect the meta physics of the mediation table. So we never say to anyone at the end, well, you didn't accomplish anything, so do you even want to come back? We don't say things like that as mediators. All right.
Yes. Yes. So I hope you all had a great, productive session and an enjoyable time during the virtual international mediation training session. So on the behalf of organizers and sponsors of this event, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for your active participation and engagement in this training program. We believe that this training session has provided you with your valuable insights into the art of mediation, which will certainly help you in the future endeavors. We would like to thank our esteemed trainer for their time, expertise, and valuable contribution to this event. Their insights and guidance have been instrumental in making this event a success. Thank you, ma'am. So we would like to also express our appreciation to all the organizers, volunteers, and technical support teams who have worked tirelessly behind the scene to ensure that this event runs smoothly. Without their dedication and hard work, this event would not have been possible. Finally, I would like to extend a special thanks to all the participants for their enthusiasm and commitment to learn. Your active engagement and willingness to learn have made this event a truly memorable and enriching experience. We hope that you had gained a valuable insight from this training session and wish you all the very best for the competition. Thank you once again and have a great evening.
It was a pleasure. And why don't you grab the Google slide deck out of the chat before Pranzi turns us off? And I see a couple of friends here in the audience, and I want to just say hello. I see your names. I know you're here. And I want to wish everyone a great time. Please make friends in the tournament. That's what's most important actually about the tournament. Please learn something new from somebody else. Please have confidence in yourselves. Just relax and be yourself and enjoy.